Have you had enough time as a permanent resident? Do you have good moral character? And how's your English? Those are the things you need to think about before you apply for citizenship. In this video, I'll be breaking down 3 things you need to know before you apply for naturalization to give you the best chance of actually becoming a US citizen. The first thing you need to do is figure out if you have enough time in the US. That is not just how long you've had your green card, but also your physical presence in the US. How long have you physically been in the US? Those are the things you need to think about. So, as far as the green card, you can apply for citizenship if you have had your green card for 3 years, if you've been married to a US citizen for 3 years, or 5 years if you do not meet the 3-year requirement. So most people will fall under the 5 years of having their green card before they can apply for naturalization. USCIS allows you to apply for naturalization up to 90 days before you hit your 5 years. So let's say your 5 years is in October, you can apply 90 days before that date. Whether it's 3 years or 5 years, you can apply for citizenship 90 days before you hit that 3-year or 5-year mark. Now, as far as physical presence in the US, you need to make sure that you are spending the majority of that 3 years or 5 years physically in the US. Okay, the US government expects you to have your permanent home in the US, and that's why they have a physical presence requirement for naturalization. So for you to actually prove that you have been a permanent resident of the US. This is where they look at, have you been outside of the US for more than 180 days within that 5-year or 3-year period, right? And they're looking at 5 years and 3 years from the day that you file your application, going back 5 years. So going back 5 years, have you been outside of the US for more than 180 days? Have you been outside of the US for more than a year? All of those things matter, because if you're outside of the US for more than 180 days, which is like 6 months, there's a rebuttable presumption. So the USCIS is going to think that you may not want to remain a permanent resident if you are outside of the US for 6 months or more, right? So you would need to prove that you still meant to remain a permanent resident. Now, if you're outside of the US for a year or more, that cuts off your permanent residency for the 5 years. So let's say on your 3rd year of being a permanent resident, you were outside of the US for a whole year and a half, right? When you come back to the US, those 3 years you were physically present in the US no longer counts towards your 3 or 5 years for naturalization. So now you have to start counting all over again. So it's really important that you know that, one, you need to have either 3 years or 5 years of a green card before you can apply for naturalization, but also you need to show physical presence in the US for the majority of that time. Finally, if you are outside of the US for 180 days but less than a year, you need to have documentation showing that you maintained residence in the US, you filed taxes, you maintained a job, you maintained a home in the US for that time that you were outside of the US. If you're outside of the US for a year or more, you know that you need to start counting your 3 or 5 years all over again. It's really hard for some people to hear that, but that's just the reality. When you say you want to be a permanent resident, you really have to make the US your home. The next thing, after you know that you have enough time in the US as a permanent resident, now you have to look at, are you a person of good moral character? Now, are you a person of good moral character? Here are the things that USCIS uses to determine if you are a person of good moral character. 1, have you been paying your taxes? Do you owe the IRS and choosing not to pay them? That's number 1. Do you have children that are under the age of 18 that do not live with you and you're not paying child support for them, you are not showing that you support them, good moral character thing right there. And then, do you have criminal history? All right. Do you have arrests? Do you have convictions? Are you on probation? One thing to know about probation, sometimes people think, okay, I'm on probation, it's not a big deal, but it's hard for USCIS to approve your naturalization if you are still currently on probation. If you are currently on probation, it's really important to note that if you choose to apply for naturalization before that probation is over, USCIS can choose to not approve you based on good moral character. Because guess what? They do not know if you are going to violate your probation. And if you violate your probation, then whatever the underlying crime was may still be instituted against you. So they need to make sure that you have actually successfully completed your probation before they will find you to have good moral character. Again, this is assuming that the crime did not make you deportable or inadmissible. This is really important when it comes to criminal convictions, because now we need to look at, is this person inadmissible or are they deportable? If you are deportable based on the crime, you should not be applying for naturalization. You are just asking to be put in deportation proceedings. Okay? So if you have a criminal conviction, even if you think it's not a conviction because you got probation, you need to make sure that you are doing the analysis with an immigration lawyer to find out if that probation, if that conviction is going to make you inadmissible or deportable. That's really the key there. Because if you have something that makes you inadmissible, you're not able to get citizenship. If you have something that makes you deportable, not only are you not going to get citizenship, you are now going to go into deportation proceedings. So this analysis needs to be done by an immigration lawyer that can give you a detailed analysis of why these things are a problem. Now, if you have a court case that does not make you deportable or inadmissible, but it's within the 5 years or 3 years period from the time you filed, typically in my office, again, I don't know how other lawyers handle it in their office, but in my office, if you have a conviction, even if it doesn't make you inadmissible or deportable, the officer can still use it to say, I don't think this person is a good person, so they don't meet the good moral character. Okay? So if the actual thing that happened that made the person end up in criminal court took place within 5 years of them filing for citizenship or within 3 years of them filing for citizenship, I typically say wait, right? Wait till you're outside of that 5-year period before you file for citizenship, because you do not want that to be the reason that the officer denies your citizenship. Because remember, even though it does not make you deportable, even though it does not make you inadmissible, the officer can still use it to determine that you do not have good moral character. And that is the thing that gets people all the time. Okay? Another thing that fits into the good moral character part is if you have any misrepresentation or if you had any fraud in the past. So one place that this comes up a lot is when people come to the US on a lottery visa and they do not include their children or they do not include their spouse. The officer finds out about it because now on your naturalization, you're including your children. That's going to raise red flags for the officer about good moral character, that this person lied to us in the past. Now you have to explain, why did you not include that child on your DV lottery application or on your DS-260 visa application? Now it becomes a whole thing. Now for male clients, they can typically be able to argue that they did not know they had a child. Again, this is only if it's true, right? If you knew you had a child and you did not put the child on your DV lottery, you were not eligible for the DV lottery, and therefore USCIS can choose to put you in deportation proceedings. You see how that works? So it's really, really important that not only are you looking at criminal convictions, but you're looking at your history. Have you ever put something on an application that was not completely accurate, or that you are concerned that USCIS is going to maybe mistake for fraud? You need to have that conversation on the front end, because if they find that there was fraud or determine that you lied at any point, they can choose to still put you in deportation proceedings. The goal of all of this, right, of you getting citizenship, is for you to be safe from deportation. You do not want to put yourself in a place where you are basically handing deportation proceedings to the US government on your behalf. Okay? So, to be safe, you want to do this analysis. That's why there's 3 things that you need to think about. Do you have good moral character? Do you have the amount of time in the US? And then finally, you want to know if you speak enough English, right? Are you able to do the civics test? Are you able to read and write basic English? This is usually the part where people are like, oh no, I'm good. And then there's people that come to me and they're just like, I don't speak English. They're coming with an interpreter, but we may be able to do a waiver for them. So it's really important that you're having that conversation, especially if you are older and you want to waive the English speaking part of things. You want to talk to an immigration lawyer and see if you qualify for a waiver. So there's different types of waivers. There's medical waivers, where you have a medical condition that makes it impossible for you to learn. Okay? A medical condition. Okay? Not just, oh, I can't learn this. It's not you that determines if you have a medical condition. That's what a doctor is for. So you're getting a doctor to fill out a form saying that this is the medical diagnosis, this is how it affects your ability to learn and retain information. So it's not you determining that you have a medical condition, it's a medical doctor determining that you have a medical condition that makes it impossible for you to learn and or retain information. So that's one of the waivers. This waiver can apply to anyone. It does not rely on age. Age can be a factor for some people. So the older clients may have, an early onset dementia, or they may be going through Alzheimer's or things like that. That's where that could come in. But younger clients may just have a learning disability or things like that. So age is not really a factor for USCIS when it comes to a medical waiver. Now, there are 3 other waivers that do rely on your age. So if you are 50 and have been a permanent resident for 20 years, you can get the English portion of the test waived. What does that mean? You do not have to read and write or speak English during your test. However, you still have to take the civics test in whatever language you choose. Okay? So you don't have to read, write, or speak English during your test, but you still have to take the civics test in the language you choose. I should mention, with the medical waiver, that also waives the civics test. So the English reading, writing, speaking, and civics will be waived if you have a medical waiver. But if you're going with the age waivers, you still have to do the civics test and pass the civics test in the language that you speak. So if you're 50 years or older and you have been a permanent resident for 20 years, you get to waive the English part of the test, not the civics. If you are 55 and older and you have been a permanent resident for 15 years or more, you get to waive the English part, but not the civics, okay? The civics you have to take in your language, but you still have to take the civics. And then the last waiver is if you are 65 and older and have been a permanent resident for 20 years, you get an additional waiver. So not only does the English reading and writing test out of the door, you still have to take the civics, right? You still have to take the civics, but now it is limited. Instead of studying 100 questions, you are now only having to study 20 questions. Isn't that better? So for older clients that may not, have a medical condition, but they've been here for over 20 years, had their permanent residency for over 20 years, that may be a better option for them, that they do not have to study 100 questions. Okay, they get the English reading and writing waived. They only have to do 20 questions. And this applies even if you speak fluent English. That's the crazy part about this 65 and older crowd, is that you get to waive the English reading and writing, and you also get a smaller chunk of questions to study for the test. So it is so good if the person is older and you're able to use that waiver. Use it. It's to your benefit, okay? Now, for everyone else that's not able to get these waivers, what you need to do is you need to be able to read basic English, speak basic English, and write basic English. Okay? So I'll give you an example of a reading test and a writing test that I have had a client have during their naturalization interview. So the reading test was, where does the president live? And the writing test was, the president lives in the White House. Now, there is not a lot of complications in that. The real complication is the spelling of the words, okay? I've had one officer explain how they score these things. Now, if you are able to write it correctly, correct spelling, everything, great, you are good to go. But if you mix up some letters and all of that, but it still makes sense in context, they may still approve you. Now, if the word is president and you put present has a meaning, right? Present has a meaning. So they cannot approve you, right? They cannot say, oh, that's great, because you said present instead of president. And present has a meaning of its own. So in that situation, your writing would not pass. However, if let's say you spelled president with a Z instead of an S, you're gonna probably pass the test because it does not have an independent meaning. And if you read it phonetically, it still says president. It's just with a Z instead of an S. So in some situations, you may still be able to pass with mixing up, letters. But for the most part, the test itself is not as hard as people may make it out to be. It really isn't. It could get harder under this administration, but as of right now, the test has not changed. Okay? So keep that in mind as you are preparing for your naturalization test, that you need to know how to read, write, and speak English, because you're going to do your interview in English. Okay? And then finally, for the people that don't qualify for the waiver, you also have to study the civics. The civics is 100 questions that you need to study and be ready to answer any of them. The officer will give you 10 questions, right? They can give you up to 10 questions and you only have to get 6 correct, okay? Up to 10 questions, only have to get 6 correct. If you answer the first 6 questions correctly, the officer moves on to the next part of the interview, okay? They're not going to go through all 10 questions if you already passed 6 of them, all right? So just know that's how that works. And then something that people always ask me, and I want to make sure that I tell you, is if for some reason you do not pass the reading, writing, speaking, civics, you do not pass, USCIS will schedule you for another interview for that test. Okay? You get one more shot at it and you get time to, study up and do all of that before your next interview. And if you do not pass at that interview, then you have to start your application process all over again. One thing you need to know about studying for the civics test, there's so many resources out there for you, so please use them. If you go on YouTube and you Google 100 questions for the civics test, it's there. If you go on the USCIS website, they have it in audio version, in video version. They even have an app where you can study and take tests. So please use all the resources, figure out the best way that you study, and use that to make sure that you pass the civics test. So those are the 3 things you need to know before you apply for naturalization, because they all matter, and you need to make sure that you meet each of those requirements before you even file, because you don't know how quickly you're going to get your interview, so you need to start studying. Right? You need to make sure your English is up to par before you file. Again, you don't know how quickly you're going to get your interview. So it's really important that you make sure that you have really thought about all 3 of these things before you file for citizenship. I hope this has been helpful to you. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. If you are starting your naturalization journey, if you're a green card holder and you want to get the ultimate protection from deportation, which is naturalization, becoming a citizen, feel free to go and schedule a strategy session with me. You can do that by going to my website, lilylegal.com, and click on contact us, where you can pick a date and time that works best for us to chat.